Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Advanced Analytics and Business Intelligence in the Cloud. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Our featured speaker is John Myers, Managing Research Director at Enterprise Management Associates. In his role as Managing Research Director of the Business Intelligence Practice Area, John delivers comprehensive coverage of the BI and data warehouse industry with a focus on database management, data integration, data visualization, and process management solutions. And before I go ahead and turn things over to John, I did want today's audience to know that John will be concluding his presentation by taking your questions. So I do encourage you to log those at any time throughout the course of the presentation by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email from Enterprise Management Associates that will include the on-demand playback as well as some additional resources. So be on the lookout for that email. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, John Myers. John?
Thank you very much, Raleigh. I appreciate that excellent introduction, and I'm looking forward to presenting today. So we're all here to talk about the Advanced Analytics and Business Intelligence in the Cloud End User Research Study that EMA recently concluded. The results are so fresh, sometimes I wonder if I'm going to smudge the electrons on my PDFs, but it's very fresh content, and I'd like to thank our research sponsors, IBM, MicroStrategy, SAP, and Tableau, for their involvement in the project and their sponsorship of such. A little bit about the agenda that we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the research highlights, some of the things that really struck me in terms of this end-user research. We're going to talk a little bit about the respondents in our survey panel. Then we're going to talk about what are some of the drivers associated with business intelligence and advanced analytics in the cloud from both a business, technical, and financial perspective. Then we're going to talk a bit about some real-world implementations that go along with this. Over the last couple of years, the EMA BI practice has not just focused on horizontal technologies for implementation in our end-user research, but asked people what are the business projects or what is being executed with their particular environments. So we're going to take a look at that. We're also going to talk about the architectures associated with those projects. Which configurations are people using? Which workloads are they associating with their cloud-based implementations? And then talk a little bit about one of the most important concepts associated with any analytics project is data integration. How do we get data from the sources where it resides into the environments where we need it to be? And then, as Raleigh pointed out, we're going to close up the presentation by taking your questions from the audience. A little bit about our research methodology. EMA has a very structured and standardized process for our survey panelists to participate in our research. We look for highly qualified individuals that have visibility into strategy, budget, implementation, and business usage of our particular end users. This particular study happens to be global in coverage. We have representatives in it from all around the world. We've balanced it between business and IT. One of the things that we feel is very important in the BI practice is that business intelligence and analytics isn't just something that is for a technology or a technologist, but it is from the results perspective to be used by our business analysts to make an effective use for businesses. So again, we balanced our result sets almost 50-50 between business and IT. And then we've also integrated some real-world insights into this. Again, we've got almost 850 active cloud-based analytics and business intelligence projects that are in our end-user research, and we're very excited about that. We're going to share information about sponsors, workloads, and some additional attributes that go along with those particular projects. But that gives you a sense about the research methodology. Let me tell you a little bit about the highlights that I've seen from the research so far. We would have thought that over the last couple of years that security had kind of waned in terms of its prominence for cloud-based implementations, in particular for cloud-based business intelligence and analytics. And what we found in the research was that at every opportunity when our respondents had the ability to express their opinion about data privacy or data security, they did in fact take that opportunity to vote early and to vote often. A lot of the statistics we have are not even close when we were giving people that opportunity to say, hey, what's important to you? Security was off the map. And I don't think it's from a perspective that people are concerned about security, because we did ask about specific security certificates and things of that nature, and a lot of people said it wasn't critical, it was important to the way that they were going to be doing their business on the cloud. But I think it's very important for organizations, whether you're considering it or you're looking at a cloud provider, is to understand where they sit from a security perspective, because that's a very important thing that's in the news. I mean, some of our more recent poster children for data security and hacking and things of that nature between Target and Home Depot have been in the newspapers quite a bit. And I think a lot of people, when they start thinking about what they're doing with data, security starts to become top of mind. In terms of the ways that people are looking at cloud implementations, I think we're starting to get away from the absolute sticker, that dollar value that we pay for our services for cloud, and we're starting to think much more about how do we get from the start to our time to implementation, or how do we make that lower. A lot of times cloud is a great vehicle for provisioning of services. So from the time that I request it to the time that I have a heartbeat on a particular system, or as I like to talk about, being able to ping a system or write a query against the system, that's the time to heartbeat. But in terms of time to value, being able to configure the system to give us valuable insights that come out of it, that's a very important aspect of a business intelligence and analytics platform. So we're seeing that organizations, when they make selections about cloud implementations, are oftentimes looking at not just how fast do I get that time to heartbeat, but how fast can I get that time to value, and how can they lower the associated total cost of ownership components that go with that. Now, I just talked about how people aren't looking at the hard dollar values associated with cloud analytics and business intelligence implementations. But what we did find is that when people want to take a look at those particular costs, they oftentimes want to see it on an annualized subscription basis. The number one answer across all the different dimensions that we asked about for pricing models came out to be that they would like to see on an annualized basis. And I think that goes to the concept that organizations are not just looking for the flexibility that comes with cloud from a pricing perspective over, say, an on-prem license implementation, but they're also looking for that cost certainty on a month-by-month annualized basis. Going hand in hand with this is kind of the people who are approving those particular budgets. We asked one question in our survey where we said, give us a sense of who's approving your budgets overall, irregardless of cloud implementation. And we saw a heavy preponderance of, that VP who approves a capital level budget. But when we asked about when it goes down to a cloud-based analytical environment, costs and things of that nature, we started to see that decision-making process and that responsibility start to move down the organization. I think as we lower those individual costs associated with cloud business intelligence and advanced analytics, we're going to continue to see that. I mean, it's not as dramatic where the VP is no longer in charge of what's going on, but definitely we're starting to see a downward shift in the responsibility of approving those particular costs. And I think that the annualized basis helps people to say, yes, this is important and I need to have some cost certainty associated with it. In terms of our survey respondents, we had 257 respondents from business and IT around the world. We had a significant number of those from North America and a significant number of those from the EU, the European marketplace. In terms of company size of people who were answering our survey, you'll see that we had almost 54% come from what I consider to be a large company, and that's a 500 to 5,000 headcount company size. We saw almost a little over 36% of our respondents coming from enterprise players, or 5,000 headcount and above, and then the remainder came from mid-size organizations, what I would consider to be 500 headcount and below. So this kind of gives you a sense of some of the companies that are involved in this particular study. So I think we're seeing the adoption rate for cloud-based advanced analytics and business intelligence is not just for, say, a mid-size organization that might be bereft of the plant and equipment associated with a traditional data center, but we're seeing that spread across a wide range of organizations. And in this particular case, our panelists come from that 500 to 5,000 headcount grouping. In terms of industry segments, we had a wide range of industries who responded to our survey. I generally tried to not discriminate based on the industry, but here we've segmented them up or banded them up into particular industry segments. But the one that really jumped out at me from both the raw data and from the information that's on the screen right now is the fact that the manufacturing industry as a non-banded industry group was our number one answer, and their number two when we do the segments all together, which tells me that, you know, in terms of manufacturing, we have people who are focused on the creation of particular products and services. They're focused on the sales and distribution of those particular items, but they may be not as focused on, say, maintaining a data center to take care of those particular details. And now they're going to a cloud-based implementation that allows them to lower their cost structure, that's allowing them to lower the amount of time it takes them to get up and running on those particular concepts. But definitely a great little mark that I think that is really coming through for the manufacturing industry. But as you can see, public services in terms of education, government, nonprofits are our number one answer in this group, and the utilities group is surprisingly a number three in that particular area as well. So in terms of telecommunications, traditional utilities groups, and then network utilities. In terms of the business drivers associated with business intelligence and cloud analytics, we definitely found an interesting trend here. So when we asked for business drivers from our panel, we found that improving the speed of implementation and flexibility were answers 1 and 2. 1 tells me that they're going to that cloud to say, let's get that time to provisioning or that time to heartbeat perspective. And number 2 is saying, how do we make sure that we've got that flexibility of configuration of what we're looking for so that as our business evolves over time, we can then make adjustments in these particular environments. So I think it talks to both where people are seeing themselves from a time to implementation perspective and a time to value perspective. In terms of technical drivers, again, as I talked about from a security perspective, data security is our number one concern here with our technical drivers. But then you look down, the number 2 is improved technical agility. Again, looking at how organizations want to be able to be flexible and agile in the way they're doing their implementations, and cloud provides them with an excellent opportunity to avoid being locked into a particular architecture, whether that's an on-prem bare metal type of environment, and how do they take that and make that much more flexible. So say, hey, as they grow, they're not needing to add plant and equipment, racks and servers and things of that nature into their environment. They don't need to be concerned that we would run out of space in our data center. They're able to be flexible to grow and contract in their particular environments from a technical perspective. In terms of the financial drivers, as you've noticed, I've generally talked about the number 1 and number 2 answers on this, and this one I'm going to focus in on the bottom 3 answers, where again I've kind of said we're moving away from that focus on the sticker price associated with cloud solutions, and we're starting to focus on the value. The bottom 3 answers are all about the sticker, and the top answers are all about how do we lower our overall or our wider total cost of ownership. So I think that organizations feel comfortable with the functionality that they're getting from cloud. Cloud providers are no longer just simply focused on trying to compete on price, and they're able to compete on concepts like time to value, lowering the amount of effort that goes into the implementations and other components that go with that. But I think we're losing the focus on strictly the absolute sticker price, but it still is important in those particular environments. In terms of the projects, again, we have almost 850. The official number is 841 cloud-based analytics projects that we got from our 257 respondents. We had a significant number that were in that 1 and 2 project range, so we got people who were putting their toe in the water with their first project or trying to make sense of where they're going with their initial projects. We also have organizations that have 4 or 5. We ask people to give us information all the way up to, indicate if they had, between 5, almost 10 or more. We only ask them about their top 5 projects, but from this group, we're seeing a significant number that are doing multiple cloud-based business intelligence and analytical projects, and they're being used for a wide range of folks. In terms of project goals, or what was the, I guess if you will, the raison d'etre for a particular project being out there, of all of our projects, our number one project goal was sales analytics. And I think this flows nicely with the concept that we, as a business environment, have spent a lot of time, trouble, and effort to put our CRM and our sales process or sales operations platforms in a cloud environment. Some of the more popular ones, Salesforce.com, CRM, Sugar CRM is being one of those examples as well, that people are now wanting to say, instead of just using those as operational platforms, how do we get the value out of them from an analytical perspective, and how can we make that go forward? So there's one addressing our top-line revenues in terms of sales analytics. If you look at the 2 and 3 answers there in terms of risk management and marketing analysis for cross-sell, upsell, you're also seeing that it's very important to link these projects to top-line revenues for cross-sell, upsell, and sales analytics, or lowering our costs to improve our bottom line margins associated with this. So again, we're seeing businesses really being focused here in how they're addressing these project goals. In terms of project sponsors, our number one project sponsor was, as you might guess, IT and data center, and that's one that we've seen more and more these days. But quickly growing project sponsors are sales, finance, human resources. Those are our 2, 3, and 4 groups there, which shows that we're seeing those business stakeholders take a much wider approach in terms of what they're doing from a project level. We asked a question about how much budget is coming to some of these projects or some of these overall analytics budgets from outside of IT, and we found that almost half of our respondents are indicating that these types of business-oriented stakeholders are bringing their checkbooks to the table and contributing into the budgets associated with the implementation of cloud. In terms of the users who are going to be consuming the information that comes from these platforms, it's very interesting to see here that we have 45%, a little bit over that, is definitely coming from the business stakeholder perspective. And if we were to band those together, it would be far and away the single largest number that we have associated with this group. And again, that shows that influence that we're seeing from finance, sales, human resources to be involved in these particular projects and to see how they're going to make that all come together. In terms of how we're consuming cloud-based analytics, I was a little surprised at this particular one. We asked people if they were using thick clients on a desktop or a laptop, thin clients via a web browser on a laptop or a desktop, or if they were using various and sundry mobile implementations. And far and away, the top 2 answers were using larger form factor thick or thin clients on the desktop or laptop. And I think that still goes to the concept that when we get into business intelligence and advanced analytics, a lot of times we need a little bit more space to visualize what we're taking a look at, because invariably whenever you get presented with a pie chart, you always want to go, hey, let me drive down through the particular pie chart. How do I get from that information to the next set of information? And I think that as we continue to grow in terms of options related to relative sizing and spacing on screens for mobile tablets and smartphones, and as we continue to find new ways to configure and consume this particular information, we'll continue to see people moving towards those tablets and mobile options. But for the most part, people are consuming cloud-based analytics through a desktop or a laptop with a larger platform. In terms of what's being done in the cloud, we asked people to give us a sense of what analytical workloads they were using. If you look at this chart and you read from the top down to the bottom, we're going from the least advanced, if you will, at the top to the most advanced processing at the bottom. And our these almost 40%, that's 30% of our respondents are using what I would refer to as a traditional analytics approach. How do we take a look at who our top 10 customers are? How do we view them by region, by product, by store? If we're going to do a what-if analysis, if we lower our prices by 3% and we do some programmatic adjustments, what can we project to see is going to be done farther down the road? But if you look at those middle three answers that I've circled there, you're starting to see that folks are integrating much more advanced analytics into their cloud environment. So you're seeing folks taking optimization models or descriptive analytics to look at the particular attributes of their top 10 customers so that they can say, hey, how do we take our top 10 customers today and either project them into next year or look at the ones that are in our current group and the ones that can grow into a top 10 customer next year. Or predictive analytics. How do we predict the revenues that are going to come from a particular customer or customer base? And all these all kind of flow together, and it's showing the importance that just as we're seeing it in on-prem or the general study of business intelligence and analytics, that advanced analytics based on prediction and descriptive analytics are becoming much more important to what we're doing these days. In terms of the architectures associated that we're running those workloads on, we asked our respondents to give us a sense of, between different components, which ones are in operation. So 46% of our respondents indicated that they had a reporting data mart architecture that was up and running in the cloud. And that kind of tells us that as people are taking some things that they do know, they can take some of those reporting components such as sales analytics that might be looking at something or some other components, and they're putting those into the cloud. Our number 2 and number 3 components, we had respondents indicating they had an analytical, and I kind of joke when I read my own slide here, I put appliance in quotes, but an analytical appliance or an analytical database, traditionally characterized as a columnar, almost in-memory type of platform that does a very, very good job of providing analytical result sets, was number 2. And then number 3, respondents indicated they had a self-service BI platform in operation. So very closely grouped all these particular platforms, but again, we're seeing people who are wanting to say, hey, give me the information that I'm looking for, but we also see some folks who are saying, hey, let me self-serve into my BI environments, and how can I handle that? In terms of the platforms that people are taking a look at, we had 62% of our respondents indicate that they had a business analytics type of platform, and that goes to that big chunk in the middle of those workloads that indicate that people want to do advanced analytical workloads associated with these platforms. So you're seeing that as a particular piece. And as we look at our second and third ones, we had 58% of our survey respondents say that they had some form of data management, whether that be a traditional structured RDBMS in implementation that goes along with those analytical appliances as well, or are they using some type of NoSQL multi-structured data support platform to take a look at that. Another 57% indicated that they had an integrated BI platform. Again, much like that self-service BI concept, is very much in the way that they're trying to take a look at things and trying to get that self-sufficiency of self-service. One key component of the survey results, we asked about data integration, and we asked a kind of a matrix question, if you will. Which way would you prefer to do things if you were integrating internal sources to internal sources, internal to cloud, cloud back down to an internal source, or between cloud sources? And what we found is a kind of a common sense approach that data integration is taking kind of that shortest path or the shortest distance between 2 points, if you will. If you have integrating 2 internal platforms, you're not necessarily going to go get a cloud data integration platform to go out and make that happen. But if you are integrating cloud to cloud or internal to cloud, you're going to start seeing much more of the components are going to be up in a cloud environment, whether that be as part of a infrastructure as a service, a platform as a service, a software as a service. But generally, the common sense approach of let's not try to bounce data all over the world back to our data center for no reason. If we're going to be doing everything in the cloud, let's put our data integration up in the cloud as well. In terms of where can we go from here, what are some of the wrap-up concepts associated with our research here that we're debuting? My number one thing is security, security, security. If you're considering a business intelligence and advanced analytics implementation in the cloud, ask your providers about what are they doing about in terms of security. How are they addressing that? We found our number one response was that people were wanting to put encryption on the data at the data management level, or as it's being stored in the cloud, was one of the number one ways they were taking care of that. If you're a provider of these particular services, you need to make sure that you have great answers to what people are taking a look at, and they're not necessarily asking, talk to me about a systrust or a web trust type of a security certificate, but they're more talking about what are the techniques that are going to allow you to make sure that you can do that. Those certificates are important, but they were never listed as the number one critical component when people were making decisions to do that. In terms of time to implementation, when you consider going up into the cloud, I always advise people to understand, again, that difference I've talked about quite a bit today, the difference between time to heartbeat, or when I can ping a system, versus time to value, when that system is going to give me good information back or something that'll be useful to my world. So, I think that a lot of the cloud providers out there are doing a really good job of helping people with end user and developer support so that they can get to that point much faster. They're also using quick start templates that allow you to say, from our experiences with other companies in the same industry or from same lines of business, we're going to help you get up and running and get you the information that you want to take a look at. And the last point that I have here on this particular slide is that growing importance of predictive analytics to cloud-based business intelligence. As I said before, it's not just in cloud, but we see some startling numbers here. It's across all of business intelligence and analytics. I think a lot of people have been in that phase where it makes sense to understand who my top 10 customers are, but as you start to drill into those questions as a data-driven type of organization, you start to ask yourself, how can I find out more from the information I have, whether that be from optimizing my assets so I can lower my costs? How do I increase my revenues? How do I get a better sense of how I can give my customers a customer experience that they would like to enjoy? Those particular components are going to continue to be more important, and I think that in the cloud you have that opportunity to mix and match some of these different technologies and make the most use of them. So I think those are my three big components associated with the research that came out. And as I'm going to hand it back over to Raleigh, and we can start our Q&A session.
Great. Thank you, John. As is mentioned on this slide, the Advanced Analytics and BI in the Cloud Research Report will be available later this month. Also, John is also in the process of wrapping up his research on Big Data 2014. So if you're interested in research on that topic, I encourage you to go to the EMA website and register. I'll also include a link to register in tomorrow's email. John, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. The first one is, was there a difference between initial projects and subsequent projects, 2 and more?
Yeah, well, we found that folks that were kind of sticking their toe in the water associated with their projects, their first project generally was either one of two things. It was either a sales analytics one where they might have said, hey, I've got information already up in the cloud, let's start to get some greater visibility into it, or they were putting together a kind of what you might call a sandbox environment where people could start to get their fingers into some data, get a feel for how they could make those environments work out. But yeah, we definitely found that first one went either sandbox for testing or moved on into advanced analytics because they already had some sales information out in a cloud environment and they wanted to start utilizing it to improve their revenues.
Thanks, John. And what are you seeing in terms of companies implementing Hadoop architectures in the cloud?
Well, that's a question I included in there. We've seen a lot of, I don't want to call it just buzz. We've seen a lot of really good, valuable information about Hadoop and its sub-projects associated with that. I'm seeing organizations implementing from a data management perspective. So in our research, we saw that people were using using Hadoop as a data management platform. But in terms of an architecture, the latest is the Hadoop-based data lake type of architecture. I haven't seen as many of our respondents who are trying to do that up in the cloud. I'm assuming it's probably something they're going to continue to work on in a bare metal data center environment, and maybe in the next year or so we'll start to see that be more prevalent up in a cloud-based implementation.
Thanks, John. Another question that came in is there a trend on the configurations that companies are using for their projects?
In terms of the configurations that they're doing, I think there's a lot of organizations that are starting to look at how do we implement from an all-in-one or a reporting perspective to get that visualization so that people can start to use it, start to get the visualization and get that into their hands. So I think that's probably one of the bigger trends that we have associated with the overall configurations that we're seeing for these architectures.
And sticking with the topic of trends, this next question is, can you explain some of the trends in the increase in advanced analytics associated with the cloud?
Well, I think it goes to the concept that I like to call it, we call it in the practice the analytics pyramid. That if you gave me an unordered list of information and I were to magically kind of sort it so that you could now see who your top 10 customers were, you would think that that was magic, going from a completely unordered or alphabetized list and instead saying, hey, here are your top revenue producers, either they're salesmen, products, customers, etc. But after a little while, you'd probably go, hey, can I see that by region? Can I see that by store level? Can I see it by those different areas in there? And then you'd start to say, okay, now if I could do that, then again you'd be, hey, that's fantastic. That's a good way to go down that particular path. But as we start to continue to drive new people who are familiar with data sets and are familiar with analytics and how they can get additional information out of it, we're starting to really get into the area where people are saying, hey, give me that statistically sound characterization of my top 10 customers, my top 10 products, my top 10 revenue producing salesmen, and how do we apply that to the rest of our organization, or how do we predict what our customers are going to be doing, what our products are going to be doing for us. So I think it's just kind of along that pyramid as we're going up it, where people have said, hey, we've seen table stakes in the past where we just looked at, whether it be, top 10 by region or things of that nature, when we're really starting to get into the range where people want to see statistically sound and significant descriptors and projections of what people are going to do.
Great. Let's take one final question. John, your research highlights the importance of security. This last question is, how are organizations making their data secure?
Okay. I alluded to that a little bit in the closing. We're seeing people using all sorts of components that go along with it. The number one answer was encryption at rest in the data management layer. So wherever that would be, whether it be in a database, Hadoop platform, or NoSQL, trying to make sure that data is encrypted at that particular level. We're also seeing people who are taking the concepts of data in flight. So one popular one I'm seeing is masking. So instead of giving people a 1 or a 0 access point to data and saying, yes, you can see it, or no, you can't, we're actually seeing people go down to the level and saying, based on your role and the group you belong to and the data you're trying to take a look at, you may not be eligible to see that it is, in fact, my Social Security number, but you would see a hashed version of that to say, if I'm looking at it from an analyst perspective, I might see, yes, there is Social Security information in there, I'm just not allowed to see it. But as you get people who get higher roles in the organization, they may have higher levels of access into that. And I think Social Security is one example, credit cards a number, personally identifiable information is going to be the stuff that we're going to see people putting security on the most. But we're seeing it both at rest and in flight.
Thanks for taking all those questions, John, and I wanted to thank our audience again for taking time out of their day to join us. Be on the lookout for the email from Enterprise Management Associates for more resources on this topic. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of your day.